If your significant other gets confused when you start talking chassis codes, or your neighbor looks at you with dread when you pull back the car cover, you might be our kind of people. I'm Craig. This is Steven. Welcome to the Broken Axle Podcast. All right, and this is where I get on the whole little fan bus about how with EV cars, it has to start small and be accessible to bigger cities because we don't have the infrastructure in the bigger towns to put all these ports. However, if you're major city living like I am, you don't need a 200-mile range. You need maybe a 150-mile range. And therefore, your standard, what do we say, 11 kilowatt hour garage charger port can fill
Yeah.
a Mini Cooper battery or Nissan Leaf.
Okay, so backfilling, just some quick numbers to run over for everybody about EV charging, because I feel like the general populace may not have a solid understanding on this.
Very small.
So most people at home are either going to have a charger installed, like hardwired installed. And I don't necessarily think that's the right option if we're trying to spread this out to the great majority of people. So the next best thing is to run a charger that plugs into a universally available socket. The most common one is the NEMA 1450, which is what a dryer or a stove or oven plugs into.
Or
and that gives you... I've never seen one plugged in, but I guess you probably could. But yeah.
Older design.
And that gives you a plug where you can change brands of car or whatever, and your charger still plugs in the same way and everything.
Yep.
Because having a brand locked charging, like hardwired charger, it's cool for Tesla. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the way to go for everybody.
Stand by for the Apple car.
Right. Charger extra.
Well, so we have, and I know there are talks between Mercedes, BMW, Ford, and Toyota about making a universal charging station as well as a port design.
Yeah.
And then they're going to release the patent for that to basically allow gas stations to buy into the franchise, if you will, to facilitate charging stations at a gas station.
Yeah, well, we have J1772 already, which is what the level 2 chargers you see. Probably you see them all the time out in Cali, what those are. And that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
But in any case, absent that, you're looking at your average household, honestly, doing more than a 50 amp charger starts to become a problem because the house doesn't have enough extra power to support more than, giving up 50 amps and 2 breaker slots.
Yeah.
For your EV charging. And that's something I think a lot of people are missing out. Batteries are a limiting factor in the charge equation, but as far as home charging, the house doesn't have enough power.
Right.
The thing Craig was just talking about, that 11K, right? So that comes from a 1450 plug running at 220, gives us a little over 10 kilowatts per hour. And that's pretty much the limit of what you're going to be able to do with a home charge setup that's not a dedicated panel and hardwired.
Which is money. That's money for houses now. That's big money. That's a new roof.
In my mind, the smart play here is exactly what Craig was talking about. We need to be looking at smaller EVs because at that point you're able to charge at 10 kilowatts per hour. But if you have a battery pack that's reasonably sized, we're looking at you, Tesla, with your 100 kilowatt pack. Sorry, 100 kilowatt hour pack.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have something reasonably sized, you can still charge that in 3-4 hours and get 150, 200 mile range out of it. And that will be pretty acceptable for the way a lot of people use their cars. This whole push for the 400 mile range thing, I get it, but I don't necessarily think it's the right direction.
Well, and then people aren't also thinking about too 400 mile range, right? You want to make a vehicle that has the same capacity that a gas, internal combustion engine vehicle has, right? 300 to 400 miles. What are you, the average consumer, going to do every night? You're going to pull into your house, you're going to hit the little trickle charger, and you're going to start charging your electric car battery. Now your battery pack is only going from, let's say, 85% down to 70 and back up again, right? You're not using the full breadth of it. And if you're one of those people who actually do use the full battery pack down to 0, you've got a 20-hour charge time now because your 400 kilowatt hour battery pack needs a day and a half to charge up.
Right. And it requires a mindset shift, right? People are used to thinking in a different way about capacity
Mhm.
for their vehicle. And really, I think the shift is going to be people to think about it more like the way you think about your phone, right? You don't
Yeah.
plan when you're going to charge it. You just, when you're home and near the charger, you plug it in and then you start every day with it full. And as long
Yeah.
as it has enough capacity to last through your day, you call that good enough.
Yeah.
You know, you talk to most people, I feel like if you're getting home at night or you're laying down for bed at night and your phone's down to 10 or 15% and you plug it in and it's ready again in the morning, you call that good.
Yeah.
Like that's just normal operating procedure.
Yep. And nobody questions nowadays the battery size on phones. We've pretty much hit a plateau where any bigger and people aren't going to notice it because they don't care.
That's what I'm saying, right? Sure, it'd be cool if you finished off your day with like 45% in the battery,
Hmm.
but no one cares as long as it
Yeah.
makes it to the end of the day.
Yeah. You're still going to throw it on. You're not gonna wait at 45% and the next morning start at 38% and then carry on your day. You're going to put it on the charger regardless.
Right. And as long as it has enough capacity to get you all the way to the end of the night, no one cares how much extra is in the tank.
Yeah.
Now, I will say with that, obviously, some people care. There's people that go out in the woods and stuff, or have jobs that require them to be have a phone on for a couple of days or something.
Again,
Sure,
those type
that's
of people
different.
wouldn't be driving EVs out into the middle of the forest.
Right. Know your use scenario for sure.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is, I feel like a lot of people are looking at the EV thing and they don't have a realistic view on what their use scenario is going to be.
Yeah. One great example that we're seeing of EVs that are implemented inside of California is Amazon trucks
I
have
heard about
switched
that.
from the transit van, Ford Transit. Now it's a Ford. I'm gonna butcher this. And this is gonna go out to public. People are gonna make fun of me, but I think it's Ford and Lycan. Is it
Oh yeah,
or
I
Ryken or
remember reading about that.
it's whoever Bob Lutz's electric car industry is, but they've now put electric motors and batteries in Ford Transit vans and sold them as whatever the name. And they only have a range of about 200 miles, but it makes sense for a delivery van to only need 200 miles because they're not going between cities and cities. They're going from the center hub in downtown San Diego to whatever region or neighborhood and coming back. And unlike internal combustion engines, they don't sit there and idle during traffic. They don't sit there and idle in neighborhoods. You pull up, thing stops, and it's not using juice any more than an LED light to keep the lights on, right? And
Right.
so the lady says that when she gets done, I actually talked to one of them, and she says you would think you'd run out of batter or juice, but really I'm down to about 20 to 15%, depending on how far I drive at the end of the day. And by that time, anyways, I'm out of packages to deliver. So the vehicle is no longer needed to have more range. It's already back.
Yeah,
And so I
and
think I
that's
think that application is brilliant.
100%. That is what I would probably have surmised as one of the ideal case use scenarios for EVs.
Right.
Uh, Relatively low speed most of the time, stop and go kind of stuff is right where they need to be. Regenerative braking makes stop and go not as much of a thing as it would otherwise be.
Mm. Yep.
Uh,
Yeah.
and that
One
use
pedal
case,
mode.
right, where they use it for a certain task till the end of the day, and it goes back to the depot and gets put on the charger until the next morning,
Yeah.
and then it gets back to work again.
Well, yeah, and in this case too, it's the vehicle's assigned to a person, and so when the person's 8 hour, 10 hour shift is done, that's it. You don't need the vehicle to keep working all night.
Right on.
So yeah, so that application makes sense. Other applications I could see stuff around military bases being small shuttle carts. We've seen obviously the thing that everyone thinks about with EVs is like golf carts and stuff like that. That
Yeah,
makes sense. Um, but as far as a viable replacement for an internal combustion vehicle, the infrastructure is still not there, and we'll get into this on a separate note if we want to split this off in a different.
I think
Um,
we're going down the right train here. Like I said,
okay.
that's I 100% believe that's going to be our hang up. I mean, we had the recent issues in California, Texas, and a few other places that to me are just huge indicators that the the charging infrastructure just isn't there. I don't see how it's going to get there.
Yeah.
For
What's interesting
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was gonna piggyback off that too. What is interesting is that the electrical grid, the power supply and production, has sort of stagnated in what the average consumer uses, but that's not because the average user is using electricity. They're actually using more, but it's because the things that we have in our houses are now more efficient where we need less. However, we still have population growth in those areas.
Right.
I was talking to a friend of mine down in the Byron Nuclear Power Plant, and their power numbers haven't grown the same amount as a population or demand would grow, and they liken that to the fact that houses are, we have more efficient motors and generators and heaters, and we have more efficient windows, and we have more efficient light bulbs. Going from incandescent to LED is huge for a
Yeah.
household, and
Yeah.
so you're seeing the power grow, but it's not in the same proportions that you would expect, and that's because we're going more efficient. However, these everyone having EV cars or whatever else would basically go logarithmic. It wouldn't be exponential; it'd be logarithmic. You'd have a certain amount you need now, and then in 10 years we'd need this much.
Right. And part of that, like I said, is going to be in people want to be able to charge their car super fast. And I think they don't understand the amount of power involved in doing that.
Right.
Like, yeah, Tesla's doing it with superchargers, but that is one
Inner
kind of
city,
specific case, and it's a lot of power. You are moving a
yeah,
ton of power.
it's inner city, and they spent the
Yeah.
money to put it someplace where it would be accessible. And of course, you want people to use it because you're making money off of it, right? But
Right.
the issue that I have is that between Los Angeles and Denver, Colorado, there's an awful lot of nothing out there. And there are a few podunk towns where you can still get cheap gas. It's not necessarily the highest quality, top tier shell. However, if you need fuel to power your car to get the rest of the distance, you can.
It'll burn.
Yeah, you can't easily run enough cable and juice and power out to the same gas station in the middle of nowhere and effectively charge your car in 30 minutes. It's going to be a 4 or 5 hour journey, and that's
Yeah.
just to get enough juice to get to the next town.
Yeah, there's some thoughts on that. There's people talking about working on fixed station batteries, like on the charging stations, having batteries to where they can expand out the draw time that they're using to get your total power draw down to a reasonable level. You're just gonna have to do it like all the time.
Yeah.
But
So like a capacitor. Like I'm just
yeah,
going to charge up the
basically,
station.
there's some new battery tech out there that's really starting to blur the line between batteries and capacitors.
Yeah, I've also read about that as well. It's exciting. It is exciting.
Yeah, and hopefully, and I've said this before, but I'll go ahead and say it on record for the world to hear. The first
Mhm.
person to pull off the next revolution, the way lithium was for battery tech, is going to be one rich bastard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's the holdup for EVs at this point, right? As far as range capacity and everything else is,
Mhm.
and price really, because a huge portion of the price is in battery.
Yeah.
Uh,
Isn't Mercedes Benz also working on a new gen battery that's non lithium?
yeah, several people are working on it.
Yeah.
The first person to get it in a production viable form is going to be huge.
Yeah. My money's going to be on some German.
It's very possible. Very
Although
possible.
the Koreans, I hear that Kia and Hyundai are massively trying to make strides up to compensate for their cars have gone up in value and sales really well in the last 10 years, and I think they're trying to jump the gun to um, the next frontier of EVs. So I know they're dumping a shit ton of money into them.
Have you seen the new Genesis?
The GV80.
No, the Genesis X EV concept.
Genesis.
Yeah, for everybody listening out there, if you haven't seen this by the time this comes out, just go ahead and Google that for me. Because
Oh, it's a Mustang Maverick or Mustang Mach-E.
first off, I don't even know where to start with this. The Mustang Mach-E is very possibly the worst Mustang ever made, possibly below the Mustang 2 in terms of shittiest Mustangs on the planet. That's my personal
by
opinion.
nameplate by Mustang.
Yeah,
It's the shittiest Mustang ever made. Now you take away the name Mustang and say that the Ford made an EV Escape.
yeah,
It's
we'll
actually
call it
pretty cool.
The EV County Squire or something, Country Squire.
Yeah.
I'm about it.
Oh, that would have been
I'm all
awesome.
about
White
it.
with like a fake wood side panel.
Fake wood grain on the sides.
Suck it.
Yeah, I'd be so hard about it. But as a
Second Grand
Mustang, no,
Cherokee.
it's awful. Yeah,
The naming
right.
convention strikes me interesting it's because we heard rumors about Chevy doing this with Corvette. They want to make Corvette its own sports car brand, and then Ford kind of beat them to the punch and gave us a Mustang brand.
Yeah,
I'm not exactly about it. The
I'm definitely
nameplate,
not
the
about it.
vehicle
No,
itself is great. Yeah, I think the
I'm not
vehicle
100%
itself.
sold on the vehicle, but that has stemmed mostly from my personal hatred of crossover utility vehicles.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's an accessible and affordable $40,000 family oriented EV that doesn't cost you a bajillion dollars, and it's not Tesla, so therefore Ford manufacturers and dealerships can take care of the
Yeah,
vehicle.
I'm with that. I'm just, as we've talked about before, the death of the wagon saddens me, and we need more wagons in the world.
If you have not seen that episode, it is a great episode about why the wagon has effectively been killed, and things like
In
minivans have evolved into this crossover
in the
nonsense.
states, wagons died. The rest
In
of
the
the world's
states,
smarter than us.
in the states, the Europeans, yeah, the
They get it.
Europeans, and I think the Philippines and Singapore, you guys still have your family haulers.
Yeah,
And Volvo, thank you for keeping the faith, for giving us the XC90.
to be fair,
I
if
think they
Volvo
have another
wasn't making a
generation
square wagon,
70.
like what would we be doing? Volvo
What would
makes
Volvo be
shoebox
doing?
wagons.
They'd be given the Polestar EV.
That's probably true.
Yeah,
Hey,
for you
speaking of
Europeans,
that,
it would be the estates. Okay.
yeah, several manufacturers have made large commitments to ceasing combustion engine development in the near future. I don't know if you've read up
So
on that.
yeah, so I read up into this, and here's my hot take on that. Well, it's not really a hot take because I had time to think about it. Development matters less when you've already received a specific output that can exceed what the normal person can use. We had this big challenge back in the early 2000s, right, with the advent of computers. Now we're into the 2020s, right? So 20 years later, and now computers and technology have gone so far advanced that we have to dumb stuff down so the average user can use them. And there's a new job sector because of it. It's called interface engineering. And all they
Yeah,
do is take something that's highly technical and have to make it stupid easy for a person to use it. Apple is a good example of doing this because Bluetooth technology in the 2000s was very high tech. And when their stuff came out and said, all you got to do is push a button, it syncs up with each other. Now I can control the microwave from my computer. Like stuff like that was like, it's
yeah,
really cool. But that's
100%. Yeah,
interface engineering. So we've gotten now to the point where technology is so advanced that people can't use it, and we're starting to see that now reflected back into vehicles. Does the normal person need a vehicle that can go 0 to 60 in less than 3 seconds? No. Can a normal person who's not Randy Popes, handle a vehicle that makes 900 foot-pounds of torque from 0 RPM, which is what electric cars do nowadays, right? No. We need all these fancy nannies and shenanigans and drive modes to make people feel like they can use it.
that's a
Well,
fair
I'm
point.
serious. I'm serious.
Yeah, the
And
great
so,
majority of modern cars are more than people can use.
at a normal person level. And so we get to the point now where your internal combustion engines, it's hard to make them more efficient. It's hard to make them more powerful, but why would you need to? And it's hard for you to. Why would you go one step beyond when your motor already does what it needs to? Great example of this. Excuse me. Chevy LS. I'm not a Chevy LS fan, although I've had two. Yeah, two. I'm actually a big block fan, but when they came out in '97, right? I think it
Yes, I
was
believe that's correct. 97 in the Corvette.
yeah, '97 and the '98. I think in the Camaros, and slowly trickled their way
Yep.
down to trucks, vans, everything else. Specific output was 260 horsepower, which is decent. Remember, this is the early '90s when 260 was a lot. Now we have
Specific,
Corvettes,
specific output. What do you mean?
as in like after catalytic converters, the whole shebang. The thing's making 260 horsepower.
Oh, in the Vets, I think it was like 340. You're thinking about like
Yeah,
the first of the 4.8 and 5.3 truck motors.
yeah. Well, yeah.
Those are
So the
pretty.
4.8 I think was 290, but that was before. Like once it's actually in the vehicle, it'll make 260 something like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, the point is that these motors lasted almost 30 years, right? We went all the way to the mid 2000s from the 90s. 2000, I think 8 or 9 was the last few years of it, and the design itself isn't really all that advanced compared to the second gen small block. However, pick your flavor. We have a 4.8 that makes 290 horsepower, and we have a 7 liter that makes 400 and bejesus horsepower, right?
Yeah.
We're in an era now where horsepower doesn't matter, and I think Subaru and Toyota have really gotten smart about that, where they don't need to keep adding horsepower to their vehicles to make them applicable. They're making a vehicle that does a good job, and the horsepower is kind of whatever at this point. Case in point is the Toyota Corolla and the Subaru Crosstrek, which I think are still sub 200 horsepower.
I just want to point out that we have you on video for the world to see at this point saying horsepower doesn't matter. I'm not sure how I'd feel about that.
Yeah, there you go. TikTok, take that. Horsepower is honestly though, horsepower nowadays is vastly irrelevant. It's pick your flavor. Any 18-year-old with a good credit score can go out and buy a Mustang that has 460 horsepower. So 160 horsepower up to 700, it doesn't matter anymore. Like, you can just buy more than you ever would need on a normal basis. We got trucks now that are dynoing more than 1,000 foot-pounds of torque from factory because numbers sell, right?
That's a fair point. So back to where this goes back to where we started this talking about EVs and stuff. I think that's a big thing that with the advent of EVs especially, and with them getting more and more mainstream, that the performance and the numbers associated with that performance kind of don't matter to people. They drive them and they're fast. Like, they feel fast. Faster than, as you mentioned, any sane human could actually use. And that's kind of all you need.
Yeah. And that's something that we actually grew up with in our generation. And for everyone out there, our generation is those from basically the late 80s, mid to late 80s to the mid 90s. So that's the generation I'm talking between. We grew up with the whole Subaru and Evo thing, right? And all these kids wanted to make 400 horsepower, 300 horsepower. And we had a guy that was a huge proponent of asking basically the double question of, do you know actually how fast 300 wheel horsepower actually is? And of course, nowadays everyone laughs because it's just 300 horsepower. It's not that.
It's Camry.
Back when we were messing, yeah, that's Toyota Camry. But back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, a 300 wheel horsepower Subaru was actually pretty fast. That's 0 to 60 in less than 5 seconds. Back in the, like I said, the 20s, the 2010s, and so when you're saying, oh, I want a 400 wheel horsepower car, like, are you going to be able to distinguish the difference between 400 and 300 wheel horsepower when it gets to that level of insanity?
Yeah, for sure.
And really, the bigger horsepower really only matters when you're already going faster than the speed limit. Like, let's be honest here.
For sure. The old Astana recalibration is a real thing.
Yeah.
First time you get into a properly
fast car. And this is coming from a guy
who
has a 500 horsepower Terminator in his garage.
Honestly, well, I do love that car. I really, really love that car. I don't know that it's that much faster at sane/legal speeds than a bone stock Terminator. It makes more tire smoke and sounds cooler, but I don't think it's actually that much faster.
I think there's a future article that we need to compare here. But getting back to the main point, when manufacturers say that they're not going to develop new gasoline engines, I think some of them are doubling down on the advent of the EVs, and I think others have realized that they don't need to develop new engines when technology exists already where you can remake current engines better. One sticking point that I always had with like Toyota is they had a really great engine that they co-developed with the Yamaha, right? The 2ZZ. They dropped all that for a big displacement AR series engine line, and really what was to stop them from taking the ZZ engine block design and putting a better head on it and putting dual fuel injection in it. And by dual, I mean you have direct fuel injection plus EFI.
Yeah, make like basically a 2ZZ with direct injection.
Yeah, and then why not call the 3ZZ? And then in that mindset, right, you don't have to design a new engine because the engine's already been designed. So saying I'm not going to design a new engine, it's like, well, I have 40 years of decent engines to go over. Why would I need to design a new engine?
Fair point. It's a fair point.
Also, more 3-cylinder turbos. Just saying.
More 3-cylinder turbos. Hell yeah! I love my little tractor.
I still have big blocks. I still like big power, but 3-cylinder turbos is why didn't we get the Fiesta ST? The new gen.
For sure. Somehow.
I got this.
And we're hot.
So, getting back to the point of small engines as well with the batteries, I believe that the future that the U.S. and more of these first world countries need to take into more account of is that the smaller engines and smaller batteries, or smaller motors, smaller cars, smaller batteries, is more of a way to integrate EVs into the current populous economy without going full overboard. And I honestly believe that, like in the European countries right now, where they actually sell I think they sell more than 2 digits worth of EVs. In the US, I think we only have 5. I think that's going to be the future, and I think that's the proper way to roll it out. Also, Renault, if you're listening, give me your EV Megane. Really cool,
right?
Or Mini Cooper, if you want to sponsor me, give me a Mini Cooper EV. I really want one.
Right. Craig's been fiending for a Mini Cooper EV as a daily.
So
I'm not even joking right now.
Yeah. So for those of you out there, if you know, oh shoot, what is it? Omaze. It's an online website where you can donate money for whatever individual cause, and they can give away houses, whatever else. We're not actually sponsored by Omaze, but they're good people, anyways.
Unless they want to sponsor us, hit me up on my DM. I'm just saying, we will totally make that happen.
Yeah. But last year there was some fundraising. I think it was for some hungry. It was to feed kids. Is general the fundraiser, but they were giving away a Mini Cooper EV, brand new, plus I think it was $35,000. So you're getting a $40,000 car plus a $35,000 cash, whatever. And I really, really, really wanted it. I'm not even a Mini Cooper fan. I don't trust them. They're BMW products. However, Mini Coopers are fun to drive, and it does not have a BMW engine. It's an electronic vehicle, and I live with an 8-mile commute to work. So basically, I have a big muscle V8 truck, and for my commuter car, Mini Cooper EV would be perfect. However, I'm not going to go out and buy a new car because that's irresponsible. But I really, really, really wanted to buy it, or really, really wanted to win it, and so that got me on the whole thing about Mini Cooper EVs.
For the record, nothing either one of us says should ever be considered as responsible car owner advice, because we're both terrible, terrible people.
We also have a show about how many vehicles we've both owned, and I think we're combined above 50. Don't be like me.
Oh, well past. Me, you, and Blake were over 100 between the three of us.
Yeah.
That was bad. So,
all right.
On that nugget of wisdom about how to not be like us, that's been Craig. I'm Steve. This is the Broken Axle, and we will see you guys next time. Go break some knuckles.
We're back 2021. Aye.